Number 10, She-Hulk. In an alternate reality spun out of a what-if story, She-Hulk and Hawkeye actually end up together. They even have a son. Their son's name is Clint Barton Jr. and his codename is Mustang. These two end up together in the reality of Earth 9811, which comes to us out of What If Volume 2, Issue 114. In this reality, the heroes never left Battleworld, but instead ended up staying there, settling down with one another, and basically having children. She-Hulk and Hawkeye seem like a strange pairing, not just because She-Hulk has super strength and Hawkeye is simply a very skilled, non-powered human, but also because I'm not really sure what they have in common other than heroics. Number 9, Laura Barton. And no, we are not talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe here, although considering how everything ends up for Clint and his family in the MCU, you might be shocked to hear about this version of the character. Remember when Clint lost his entire family during the events of Infinity War and became Ronin before undoing the snap and helping get everyone back, his family included, in Endgame? This is like that, but much more tragic. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Hawkeye ends up settling down with his longtime girlfriend Laura, whom he eventually marries and starts a family with. Pretty different from his 616's ways, considering that Clint has had tons of romantic relationships, very few of which have seemed completely stable. Laura and Clint have 3 children together, and Clint always calls home before missions to say goodbye, in case the worst should possibly happen. Following him home one time, Clint's family become targeted by an enemy looking to use him to discover secrets on how to best defeat his teammates. They kidnap Clint and kill his entire family, which turns out to be a huge mistake on their part, because when Clint finds out, he uses his fingernails as weapons to kill his interrogators, escape, and ends up getting revenge on the person responsible in this reality, Black Widow. Man, I would not want to be Black Widow in that reality. And before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want more like it, show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Penny. Penny was a woman Clint had a random dalliance with that came back to haunt him. Penny first appeared in issue 3 of Matt Fraction and David Aja's Hawkeye series, where she was referred to initially as Cherry. After selling her car to Clint and then sleeping with him, it was revealed that the Mafia wanted her. Fortunately, both Hawkeye's Clint Barton and Kate Bishop were able to help Penny escape the Mafia and get safely to the airport. Later on, Penny returned to ask for Clint's help after the Mafia tracked her down to get the combination to a safe only she knew the code for. In the same arc, we learned that Cherry was actually Penny, and later on that Penny was actually Darlene. Darlene Penelope Wright, to be more exact, or Penny for short, because Penelope, you get it? Her reappearance actually caused quite a bit of a stir. You can check out Penny's first appearance in the 2012 Hawkeye series in issue 3. Number 7, Night Nurse. One of the most unsung heroes in the Marvel Universe is Night Nurse. While Linda Carter hasn't been the only one in Marvel to wear this mantle, she is the version of Night Nurse we are talking about here, and is actually the oldest character in Marvel to have taken on that mantle, starting out in the comics as a student nurse. In the latest Spider-Woman series, during the King in Black event no less, Hawkeye's ex, Jessica, ends up finding out about his relationship with Linda at kind of the most awkward time. Even Linda herself acknowledges how Clint's fixation on their relationship has some pretty terrible timing, with Clint even going so far as to make a jealous remark after discovering that Stephen Strange left some magical shackles behind with Linda. You can check out the magical shackles, awkward banter, and a pretty crazy fight between Spider-Woman and Captain Marvel in issue 7 of the 2012 Spider-Woman series. Number 6, Jessica Drew. Jessica and Clint had a very interesting relationship. I don't want to present either of these heroes as looking awful, as to be honest, I kind of love both of them, but their relationship was definitely a wobbly one that in the end kind of crashed and burned. Remember Penny, who I mentioned earlier as being a kind of random hookup for Clint? Well, it turns out that that random hookup actually happened while Clint and Jessica were together. It seems that there was a huge misunderstanding as to what the rules of the relationship were. In the end, there just wasn't a lot of clear communication from both sides, which ended up leading to Jessica being very hurt when she found out that Clint had slept with Penny during their relationship. This obviously ended things in a very dramatic fashion between the two, and while Jessica and Clint are in a little bit of a better place now, the ending of their romance was a rough one to read. If you want to experience it for yourself, check out issue 8 to 9 of the 2012 Hawkeye series. Not the whole relationship though, just the crash and burn part. Number 5, Moonstone. Despite the fact that Moonstone, aka Karla Sofin, is often a villain in the comics, she and Clint actually had a pretty well-established relationship. This took place during Clint's time on the Thunderbolts, where he was tasked with turning the team into a true group of heroes, being able to empathize with the desire to do good, but having a history of being bad. While their connection was pretty steamy, it sadly didn't end well. Karla ended up with so much power that it made her mind unstable, and after suffering a psychotic break, Hawkeye was used to force an arrow to help make her tangible long enough for the Vision to remove both of her moonstones. She had 2 at the time, hence her going kind of crazy, you know? Number 4, the WASP. I still can't believe this was a thing. I mean, I know these two are both Avengers, teammates, and even friends, but when you go back and read Hawkeye's attitude when Janet was leading the team, it's almost impossible to imagine these two ever ending up together. Granted, it is implied in the comics that their relationship is undefined and possibly more physical than anything, but it still managed to go on for probably at least a month, which to me is very surprising. Go way back to issue 227 of Avengers, where Clint can't stop himself from complaining about how bossy Jan is, to issue 503, when we are treated to a flashback of her having a pregnancy scare revolving around her and Hawkeye potentially having kids together. It's just, wow. We've come a long way. I guess it just goes to show how much Clint Barton really has changed as a person over the years. Number 3, Mockingbird. Despite these two being married and having a long time on and off again romance in the comics, their relationship is still one of the weirdest out there. Clint and Bobby got married relatively quickly in the comics, and from there it was basically all downhill. During a mission with their team, the West Coast Avengers, Mockingbird was assaulted and ended up allowing her assailant to die as a result of the emotional and physical trauma that she had suffered. Hawkeye, however, actually didn't believe Mockingbird's retelling of the events. Yikes, that's pretty awful. Eventually, however, the two did manage to move past those events and reconcile, but unfortunately, Mockingbird died almost immediately after that happened. Later on, it was revealed that the Mockingbird that had died was not actually the real Bobby Morse, but was in fact a Skrull. Gasp. Bobby returned to Earth, but had been tormented while in prison by a Skrull impersonating Hawkeye, so just seeing Clint was pretty traumatizing for her. Add in that before she was abducted, Mockingbird had actually planned to file for a divorce with Clint, and you have a pretty weird and tragic stage set for their reunion, with Clint being like, "I'm so glad you're back," and her being like, "Ah, get away from me." Number 2, Scarlet Witch. After the events of House of M, Clint ends up tracking down the Scarlet Witch to check in on her. In the comics, it's always kind of been implied that Clint had a thing for Wanda, and of course, she is one of those characters that in her early days at least, everyone simply desired her because they just found her beauty so irresistible. Even Namor was into it for a time and even compared his desire for her and his attraction to her to that of his desire for Susan Storm of the Fantastic Four. Wow. Clint runs into Wanda in a small community in Transia, but faints just as he finds her, apparently due to the thinness of the mountain air. When Clint wakes up, he finds himself in her apartment. She offers Clint food and tea, and the two talk before they end up feeling a pull towards one another and sleep together inevitably. Wanda doesn't seem to remember her past or who she was or Clint, or at least that's what she wants Clint to think. The brief romance is meant to symbolize closure for both heroes, except that it wasn't what it appeared to be, depending on your opinion of these events. Number 1, DOOMBOT? As if the idea of Clint sleeping with an amnesiac Wanda wasn't weird enough, a different layer of weird was added to that romance story when it was implied that the Wanda staying at that apartment wasn't actually Wanda at all, but in fact was a DOOMBOT put there to replace and imitate her. It's not specified though as to when this swap took place, so some still believe that the Wanda Clint slept with was in fact not a DOOMBOT. Though if she was a DOOMBOT, then of course that only makes the whole story weirder and also removes the symbolized closure from it for Clint, or obviously Wanda, who was never there really, but was actually off with Dr. Doom, who intended to marry her.
Coming in at number 10, Agent Venom and Valkyrie. When the military hero Flash Thompson was selected to be the host of the Venom symbiote as Agent Venom, he was handpicked by Steve Rogers himself, just establishing the Avengers connection because he did fight alongside Hawkeye's Secret Avengers team. And while he was with said team, he started this very flirtatious and strange romance with Valkyrie, one that she herself would soon after escalate into a more physical romance. Now, while it may seem sort of interesting to have this enhanced alien soldier dating an Asgardian Grim Reaper, it just didn't make the cut when the creative team wanted to make changes. Because they found it a little weird. Coming in at number 9, Scarlet Witch and Vision. Now I know what some of you are thinking, whoa Johnny, come on, they just got their own Disney Plus show, why would you put them on this list? Well friends, as healthy as their relationship can appear on screen for the MCU, it is an entirely different story in comic books. The comic version of these two characters get married and for a brief period they're happy. However, slowly the differences between android and human life become more apparent to them, and thus their relationship begins to fall apart at the seams. More specifically in the Tom King Vision series, we see a less than ideal relationship between Wanda and Vision. Due to Vision's lack of awareness when it comes to things like basic human emotions, and of course his inability to give Wanda children, the pair just felt strange to watch work through all of these extremely obvious red flags in their romance. Coming in at number 8, Thor and Jane Foster. Much like Scarlet Witch and Vision, Thor and Jane Foster suffer from a similar romance red flag. The fact that they are literally two different types of creatures certainly creates issues, and this becomes even more apparent when a partner is in need and it's clear that the other just doesn't have the tools mentally, physically, or emotionally to assist them. Thor is a god from Asgard and Jane is a doctor on Earth. Both jobs would certainly be impressive to their peers on their respective planets, but from the jump of their blooming romance, even they knew it was a little bit weird. Now to be fair, this relationship becomes much less weird once Jane actually takes over the title of Thor. Coming in at number 7, Yellow Jacket and Wasp. Now when we're talking about the Avengers, we can't forget the weird relationship between the founding members Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. Now, this pair had a pretty normal relationship for many years. However, things began to take a weird turn when Hank experienced a mental break. As he was processing this change in his mental state though, he decided to create an alternate superhero identity for himself called Yellow Jacket. Now Wasp knew that this was Hank the whole time, but the rest of the Avengers didn't know that it was Hank, and even Yellow Jacket himself would forget that he was Hank Pym. So when the Yellow Jacket and Wasp had a surprise wedding, it was all the more shocking. Eventually the team would discover the truth, but by that time Hank's mental health had worsened. Eventually he got better, but then his relationship ended, so yeah, the whole thing was weird. Coming in at number 6, Black Knight and SERSI. While Dane Whitman was holding the title of Black Knight, he joined the Avengers, which is where he would end up meeting the very powerful Eternal known as SERSI. Slowly but surely, a weird relationship began to form between these two battle-ready warriors. Although when an evil villain named Proctor came from the future to kill every SERSI across the multiverse, their bond was strengthened because, well, it was put to the test. This was a pivotal moment for their relationship, and to make their bond extra strong, they enlisted the help of fellow Eternal Icarus. Icarus made it possible for Dane and SERSI to actually fight Proctor, although in a shocking turn of events, Proctor turns out to be a version of Whitman from the future that just went insane. Once they defeat Proctor, the pair try to work on their relationship, but as that eternal bond disappeared, so did their will to stay together and make it work. Coming in at number 5, Thor and Captain America. Okay, now I know what you're thinking right away, and I was just as shocked, which is why this relationship feels weird to some people. In Marvel's all new, all different Avengers, they put together a brand new team of heroes, and I mean brand new. Within that were, of course, some of their next generation versions of their classic heroes like Thor and Captain America. Except in this comic, Sam Wilson is holding the mantle of Captain America already, and Jane Foster is the new Thor, which leads to a very interesting kiss between the two that completely divided comic book audiences. Mostly because of that first point I made. The MCU did an excellent job of making you think of these two characters in a certain way. You know, longtime friends who were excellent teammates for many years. However, this time, readers got to explore a new dynamic between Sam, Jane, and the classic hero positions they represent. Although, that being said, much like Thor playing a game of Fortnite, this experience was short-lived. Coming in at number 4, Spider-Man and Mockingbird. This one is an interesting relationship because as heroes, these two were an excellent pairing together, but the thing that made it weird was that their real-life personas didn't match up at all. After the secret invasion, Mockingbird was attempting to escape her ex-husband Hawkeye. This eventually led her to take cover with S.H.I.E.L.D. Pun intended, which is where she would start working with Parker Industries. While there, Peter designed her a brand new advanced costume and they slowly started to build a flirtatious relationship. This did lead to some genuine feelings after they experienced fighting on missions together, but then the pair officially began to date for a bit, but honestly it was a really low point in both of their character storylines. Coming in at number 3, Scarlet Witch and Wonder Man. This one is the definition of weird and messy. I mean, compared to what Wanda's relationship would turn into later on with Vision, this one with Wonder Man isn't that bad. Although, here's where things get just a little bit messy. Ultron used Simon Williams' brain patterns to create Vision. Yeah, so when she began to have feelings for Vision, Wanda really started to question if they were genuine or not. Then after Wonder Man died, things got even weirder because his ionic energy ghost began haunting Wanda until she agreed to bring him back to life so that they could date. Man, am I right, ladies? Terrible joke. The worst part is that after Simon came back, it was already too late. Wanda's feelings for Vision were so strong, and this drove them apart. Coming in number 2, She-Hulk and Thor. Not unlike our Thor and Captain America point, this relationship also challenged the typical dynamic of Earth's greatest heroes. When Jennifer Walters transformed into a more Hulk-like version of herself, she entered into a physical and then romantic relationship with Thor. This was definitely a weird choice for a relationship pairing, and not only did it take audiences a long time to get used to the idea, but the Avengers equally struggled with it. However, despite the haters, love prevailed during the Empire event where they made things official. Still weird. But not the weirdest. Coming in at our number 1 spot, Iron Man and Tony Stark. At this point, we've gone through some pretty weird relationships, which really makes you wonder what these writers were thinking when they put the pen to the pad. I mean, you have to assume they were on something to come up with some of these ideas. I mean, take our final point. In Invincible Iron Man number 30, Tony Stark's Iron Man suit is struck by lightning and gains sentience, which leads to it falling in love with Tony Stark. Like, bruh, what? Then when Tony says he doesn't like Iron Man like that, the suit apparently gets its feelings hurt and decides to kidnap him. Then the suit takes him to an island, actually ties him to a tree, and tortures him. Ultimately, the suit of armor tears out its own heart to save Tony, but it certainly was a bizarre storyline and a really toxic relationship.
Number 10. Domino. With all these crazy missions that superheroes go on, you gotta wonder just how they deal with some of the horrible situations that they've had to deal with. Maybe hooking up with each other is one of those ways to pass the time and get over things. Yeah, so Wolverine and Domino weren't together too often, but when they were assigned to the same X-Force team, their relationship grew pretty strong and they ended up working out a friends with benefits type deal. So yeah, after these crazy missions, they would unwind with each other. We can find this firsthand in X-Force Sex and Violence. I mean, of course, just read the title. And in this story, Domino gets involved with the Assassin's Guild and the Hand and needed a way to get her mind off the events. I mean, you could do that, or therapy, for sure. Different strokes for different folks. Literally. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on the video because it helps out our channel so much. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's keep going with this crazy list. Number 9, Amir. This next romance lasted about 10 issues and it begins with Wolverine Volume 3, issue 48. She even says for Logan not to worry about their hookup because Atlanteans don't have the same hang-ons that humans do when it comes to physical intimacy. It can be just about the physical elements only. And it's funny because Wolverine is the timid one this time around. He's vulnerable. He even says that he's not worried. He just feels like he needs someone to talk to lately. So what started out as Amir and her team helping Wolverine with a mission turned into this relationship, with Wolverine really caring about her. Amir unfortunately didn't survive during a mission against the Scimitar organization. Number 8. Lin's son. This next one happens in the 4-parter Wolverine Manifest Destiny. So when Wolverine was in Chinatown, San Francisco, he saved a woman named Lin from the crime lord, the Black Dragon. She refers to him as her lover in issue 3. Now, what Wolverine doesn't realize is that by successfully taking out the Black Dragon, Logan now becomes that role. So naturally he refused, but by refusing, that upset Lin. To quit would be dishonorable to everybody, so while he was leaving, she stabbed him in the eye with a spearhead, warning him not to return. So when the X-Men relocated to San Francisco, he took a trip down memory lane, but now Lin is not the same. Lin is dead, lover, she says. You killed her a long time ago. Then she goes on to explain that now she's the Black Dragon, Queen of the Triads, and Empress of the Chinatown underworld. Wolverine took over as the new Black Dragon and Lin escaped through the sewers holding that same spearhead. Number 7, the Pink Lady. Wolverine and Dupe, issue 1. We find the Pink Lady, this mysterious woman who Logan met during his time with Dupe. Now, Wolverine and Dupe were looking for this stolen artifact named the Pink Mink, which of course led them to the Pink Lady. At first, Dupe is all over her. She's laying on the pool table, they're having a moment, and Logan in the meantime is just hanging out at the bar. In issue 2, things start to escalate. So the Pink Lady is sitting with Dupe and Logan, and things are getting kind of flirty now. After a daring rescue, there's a few emotions in the air, and Logan tells Dupe to back off because he is clearly not her type. The Pink Lady even asks them to stop fighting over her, but sarcastically, you know? She's like, hey, knock it off, quit it, you two. Logan ends up getting with the Pink Lady, and Dupe gets with the Pink Mink. Everybody wins. Number 6, Black Cat. Wolverine and Black Cat Claws was a 3-parter released in 2010. In it, we find the start of a romance with Felicia Hardy, Black Cat. When she first met with Wolverine, they were both kidnapped by Kraven the Hunter, and in order for him to hunt them down on his tropical island. Sounds like a great way to pass the time, sure. Now at the start of this, Black Cat and Wolverine were really not a fan of each other. But after you go against Kraven and run around together, you're bound to bond in some way or another, especially when you're beating up bad guys together. So while it turned out that Kraven was actually a robot the whole time, the true villain all along this whole time was Arcade and his girlfriend White Rabbit. So now they're taking down robots together, and in the third part of the story, the cover alone suggests that the pair get pretty close. So Black Cat steals a helicopter, Wolverine almost gets eaten by a fish. It's wild. And then this is when Black Cat admits that Wolverine was growing on her. And then on cue, he hops out of the water. And then cuts to the two of them on a date a few days later where Black Cat reminds Wolverine that she can also smell pheromones. Number 5, SERAPH. This one comes from Wolverine Origins Annual number 1. Her name was SERAPH, and she was really something else. She had taught Logan how to kill, and he enjoyed killing people for her. Kind of the perfect pair, if you ask me. She was ruthless to most, but to him, she was gentle. Yeah, for a 1920s relationship, this one was pretty spicy. I mean, Logan carved trees for her. He was romantic. But there was more to her than Logan had thought. I mean, after all, he says, why would this woman that I loved so much lie to me? Then in Wolverine issue 126, he looks back and reflects on their relationship and how she was killed sadly by Sabretooth. Another love lost to time. Number 4, Gak. Sometimes you can find love in places you never thought you would. Like say for instance in Savage Land. When Wolverine got to Savage Land, he was alone. He was doing a solo adventure and then he encountered a tribe whose leader challenged him to a battle, trial by combat. The two battled it out and Logan came out on top with the tribe cheering along. Gak is defeated. But who is this Gak? When he goes to meet the leader, he's surprised that it is a woman. Who knew? They can fight too, Wolverine. They spent some time together and they eventually became lovers. So Gak became pretty protective over him as she fought off the other woman who got even close to him. Things took a turn once Wolverine started getting chased down by a dinosaur, and then he was promptly eaten by said dinosaur. But of course he was revealed to be alive, and then Gak tried to find ways to keep him in the Savage Land after that. She's like, yay, you're back, but also don't go anywhere. I'm gonna hide your plane. Yeah, she hid his plane from him. She wanted no way for this guy to get out. But eventually he had to return home by plane with a sad Gak watching. Hate to see you go, but love to watch you leave, Logan. Number 3, Squirrel Girl. Doreen Green. Alright, this one's pretty messed up. This has been speculated for a while now, and it comes down to a simple page of text. In New Avengers, issue 7, we see the two talking as if something had happened. Something rather intimate, that is. Cause see, Doreen is like, well, I hope we can agree to be professional, and Wolverine's like, why of course. Also, you look amazing. And she's like, hey, you look amazing too. So there's something there. This romance fling thing becomes more evident come Wolverine issue 8, when Emma Frost had entered Wolverine's mind and literally found a room called Sexual Fantasies. So Emma says, I know I'm gonna regret doing this, and maybe she was right. Upon opening the door, none other than Doreen Green is there herself, just hanging about. Number 2. Ultimate MJ. Ah, yes, the Ultimate Universe, home to the Scarlet Witch Quicksilver relationship, which still ended up making its way into this list. But there's also some MJ and Wolverine weirdness that happens as well. So after Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, Wolverine and Spider-Man switched bodies. Yeah, I'm talking Freaky Friday style. This all happened after Mesmero switched their bodies. So Peter was like, okay, well, if you're me now, I really need you to go to school. We're like 15. This is important. This is the only thing you have to do. And also maybe fight a couple of bad guys. So while Wolverine was in Peter's body, he at one point ended up kissing MJ and even tried to sleep with her. Yeah, I guess all those walks to school with her made him realize how awesome she was. MJ told him she wants to wait until they're older for that kind of thing though to happen. Thank God she said that, honestly, or else I don't even want to know. I don't want to go down that road. And number 1. CHARLEMAGNE. This one was revealed in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine back in 1987. So back when Wolverine was a spy, he had gotten with an agent known as CHARLEMAGNE, and they were really close, like most of these are when they start. So after their time together, she went on to become a mercenary for the KGB, but when they finally reunited, she had gotten too deep into this trouble and wanted Wolverine to be the one to take her out rather than her get tortured. Brutal concept, just all bad. But good guy Spider-Man luckily wasn't gonna let that happen as long as he was there. So they fight it out a bit until one of Spider-Man's punches accidentally hits her instead of Logan. And then Wolverine holds her until she fades away. Wow, nothing like Spider-Man just punching one of your past lovers out of existence. So for that, this one easily takes number 1 because of how sad it is. MJ is weird and gross and creepy, but this is, you know.
Number 10, Mockingbird. This wasn't a weird pairing because it was so much really bad or anything. It was just more weird because it was pretty random. Although these two had some fun moments, most fans felt that there just wasn't much staying power between them. Also, Spider-Man is a major jokester, and Mockingbird seemed to actively dislike laughing at Peter's jokes. She's pretty no nonsense. The nice thing is that Peter didn't have to worry about Bobby when it came to her being strong, independent, and being able to take on any baddies who might come her way because of her attachment to Spider-Man. In the end, however, everyone kind of felt the relationship was more of a placeholder, something for now but not for forever, as these two both had much more memorable and well-suited pairings when it came to the world of comics matchmaking. And there's also that weird thing of, you know, they don't really have much in common besides their work, so there's that. Number 9, Mary Jane Watson. I know, how could Mary Jane make the list again, you might wonder. You're like, Amanda, really, Mary Jane? Which Spider-Man is she paired with now that's so weird, you wonder? Well, once again, I am not talking about her relationship with Peter Parker, although if we really wanted to explore some of their alternate relationships from alternate Earths and some specific moments in their relationship, there are a few times that even those two have been weird together. But no, this time around we are talking about Mary Jane Watson and Spider-Woman Jessica Drew. When did this happen? Where did this happen? In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610. The two weren't ever officially together, but Jessica definitely had feelings for MJ as she shared the memories, thoughts, and emotions even of Peter Parker, who she was a clone of. Yeah, in Ultimates, Jessica Drew has a different origin story, and like Ben or Kane are on Earth 616, she herself is also a clone of Peter, just a female clone, who was created by Dr. Kurt Connors and Dr. Otto Octavius for the CIA and FBI. The weird thing was less that Jessica was attracted to MJ, and more that she was attracted to her because of Peter's memories. None of her memories were her own, because that's how cloning works in this reality apparently. And before we move on to our next spot, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already and if you're enjoying it. Because yeah, weird things deserve likes, I think. Number 8, Carly Cooper. Carly ended up basically hating Spider-Man after being in a relationship with him, which was pretty unfortunate considering that she was a fan favorite when it came to her relationship with Peter. Carly was very patient with Peter initially and didn't even seem to mind when Peter would kind of zone out when they were together and not even notice when she left a gathering early, which is pretty awkward. She worked as a forensic specialist for the New York Police Department, so they seemed like a logical match. Both were brainy and involved in the fight for justice. However, when Peter Parker revealed that he was Spider-Man, Carly found herself unable to continue their relationship, and the two broke up. However, Carly would still be haunted by this revelation and secret, which she fought very hard to protect. It eventually caused her to move away from New York for a time after a traumatic event where she found herself exposed to the Goblin formula and transformed, being given the name Monster and recruited into the Goblin King's Goblin Army. Carly was later cured, but this experience would definitely stay with her. Number 7, Elizabeth TYNE. Elizabeth TYNE was initially introduced by the name Janine Godby, which was an alias that she assumed to escape her past. The weird thing about this relationship wasn't so much how it unfolded, though being in a relationship with any clone of a superhero is always going to be weird, but more in how it started, and in Elizabeth's resemblance to another major love interest from Spider-Man comics, Mary Jane Watson. I specifically just want to focus on the weird interactions in the beginning of this relationship though, although it is weird that, you know, Ben Reilly's a clone and then Janine/Elizabeth just happens to resemble Mary Jane. That's pretty weird. Ben Reilly approached Janine initially and upon their first meeting was taken with her, asking her out in the most bizarre and kind of strangely movie-esque way. He's like, look, I know this is going to sound like a line, but well, I'm new in town. I know that's lame, but I swear it's true. It's just lame that you're using it as a line, Ben. So I'm new in town, and well, I was wondering if maybe we could have, I don't know, dinner tonight? And initially Janine just turns him down, and I think we can see why from that thing that he just said, which is a lot. I feel like Ben also got Peter's awkward charm as well in the cloning process. However, because it is charm, even though it is awkward, Janine immediately changes her mind because, yeah, awkward charm. Ben never makes it to their date, however, because hero stuff, but does run into Janine and apologizes and asks if they can try again. Now, she initially says no once more, and I actually love this like one series of panels so much. I wish that they had just left it there because it's really funny, but she actually adds like right after that he can take her to lunch right now. How spontaneous and romantic and kind of presumptuous, but okay. I also like that he's just like, alright, great, I wasn't doing anything. It's like if that were me, I'd probably be like, well, maybe not now, but like maybe in a bit. Number 6, Rogue. So this isn't main continuity Spider-Man or Rogue, but it's still a romantic moment that happened between the two characters, just on the Earth of 161. The two teamed up together in X-Men Forever 2. Rogue at the time had the guise of Nightcrawler, but still sports her very familiar brown and white hair. When Spider-Man encourages her to follow her heart, she warns him that she just might do that, sugar, and leans in to kiss him. I know what you're thinking, a kiss with Rogue could be deadly, but here Rogue was led to believe that she actually would be able to kiss Spider-Man without hurting him, so no worries there, don't panic. However, the romantic rooftop moment was then interrupted by Jean's telepathic shouts for Rogue's assistance. It's telepathic romance blocks, you know what I mean? Jean's like, help. Rogue's like, it's not a good time. Number 5, Deborah Whitman. This is an interesting relationship considering it was very one-sided. Deborah Whitman was a secretary at Empire State University where Peter was a student. She pined after Peter, and although at times it seemed like Peter didn't even notice her existence, the two started dating. Needless to say, they didn't make for a great partnership due to the fact that Peter kept having to bail on their dates to attend to heroic business as Spider-Man, but didn't really want to confide in Deborah, so he just gave her a ton of really lame excuses. Eventually, the two broke up, but Deborah remained obsessed with him and began to fantasize and hallucinate that he was Spider-Man, in essence making the ultimate excuse for his behavior while also idolizing him. When her therapist approached Peter after learning of this and asked him to wear a Spider-Man suit to help shock her out of her fantasy, he refused to do so, which obviously the therapist was like, well, that's weird, but okay. Deborah, becoming delusional, later ended up in a toxic relationship as a result of all of this, making excuses for her then husband. Fortunately, Peter did eventually confess to her that he was Spider-Man, which helped Deborah to move forward and woke her to the truth of her current relationship, motivating her to get a divorce. Thank goodness. Still pretty crazy. Number 4, Mary Jane Watson. Again. Another weird Spidey pairing with Mary Jane also comes to us from The Ultimates, because Spider-Man's clones all had his memories, they were just all basically into MJ. And not just Jessica. All the clones were meant to have their memories wiped so that they could develop their own identities and also be used in the process, but they escaped the facility where they were kept before this could happen. As a result, Kane, who also here sports an even creepier version of his half-melted face, ends up trapping Mary Jane and kidnapping her, claiming it's all out of love for her. Oh, if someone does that to you, you just need to get out of there. Seriously. Which is what MJ tries to do. She's like, no, let me out! Initially, she thinks that he's Peter from a silhouette, but then when she sees his face, she's horrified and knows something is definitely wrong, and this probably isn't her Peter Parker. Of course, she is right. Kane, out of love for MJ, wants to protect her by making her stronger. To do this, he exposes her to the Oz formula, which ends up turning her into a big red monster temporarily. Bet you thought I was gonna say a big red dog, but no, that's Clifford. Fortunately, the real Peter Parker shows up and is able to use his presence to calm MJ down, transforming her back into a normal teenage girl. Well, normal. I mean, I feel like she just went through some stuff and she might transform again, but sort of normal. Mostly normal. Number 3, Louise Kennedy. The story of Louise Kennedy comes with a pretty powerful moral. Never date Kane Parker. Louise was a cop in Salt Lake City who had turned dirty and was on the criminal drug lord Vincent Tannen's payroll. She and Kane shared a night of passion, and both had feelings for the other. Both became this light in the darkness for one another, this hope that they could be redeemed or saved or become better. After Kane found out about Louise's betrayal, however, he ended up being forced to confront her and eventually killed her as a result. After snapping her neck, he left his mark on her, burning her face with the mark of Kane, shocking Ben Reilly, who was actually there to witness all of this, and whom he'd actually saved in killing Louise. It's a very terrible end to a relationship. Let me just burn your face after you're already dead. Number 2, Mia Flores. One of the most random when it comes to Peter's interactions with women. Mia Flores kissed Peter while he was out with Carly Cooper, Harry Osborn, and Lily Hollister. Like, she just randomly grabbed him and then kissed him. She didn't even introduce herself first. She was just like, I'm gonna kiss you. I'm like, oh my goodness. Peter did not sign up for that. This was all part of a ploy for Mia to basically get in with Harry's entourage, wanting to get closer to him. But the weird part of the whole interaction was just how stalkery Mia was acting during this whole thing. It was like she was out to kill. She was like, Peter, I'm coming for you in this club. And Peter, rather than just confront Mia and be like, I'm really not into you and no thank you, decided to, of course, jump out a window instead. Because that's how Peter Parker likes to solve problems sometimes. This was less of a relationship and more a weird attempt at a romantic and sexy moment from Mia, but it's just really awkward and strange, and I felt it was so weird that I needed to include it, even though it's not a full relationship. Technically. Number 1, Jessica Carradine. Remember that time Ben Reilly pined after the daughter of the man who murdered Uncle Ben? No? Well, take a seat, cause yeah, that happened. Jessica Carradine is the daughter of Dennis Carradine, the name that would later be given to the man who killed Peter Parker's Uncle Ben. She grew up with a hatred of Spider-Man, believing that the hero was actually to blame for the death of both Ben and her father. She believed that her dad was basically framed by Spidey. Needless to say, she and Ben's relationship is catastrophically ruined when she realizes that he is Spider-Man. I don't even know why Ben would go for this if he was aware of Jessica's name and her ties to the man who murdered Uncle Ben, but hey, I guess it wasn't technically his uncle since he's just Peter's clone. One of Peter's clones. It should be noted that Jessica did eventually come to terms with the fact that her father was actually the guilty party, but she still couldn't be with Ben because she was then just too worried for his safety, since he often puts himself in various dangerous situations as Spidey.